Welcome to 5 Minutes Alone with God. Today we're in the Gospel of Mark, and I'm in chapter 8, continuing this chapter, starting in verse 11. Then the Pharisees came out and began to dispute with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven, testing him. But he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, "Why does this generation seek a sign? Assuredly I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation." And he left them, and getting into a boat again, departed to the other side. Now the disciples had forgotten to take bread, and they did not have more than one loaf with them in the boat. Then he charged them, saying, "Take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, and the leaven of Herod." And they reasoned among themselves, saying, "Is it because we have no bread?" But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, "Why do you reason because you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive nor understand? Is your heart still hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? Having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for 5,000? How many baskets of fragments did you take up?" And they said to him, 12. "Also when I broke the 7 for 4,000, how many large baskets full of fragments did you take up?" And they said, 7. So he said to them, "How is it that you do not understand?" Then he came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand, and he led him out of town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. And he looked up and he said, "I see men like trees walking." Then he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up. And he was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Then he sent him away to his house, saying, "Neither go into town, nor tell anyone in the town." What is this passage talking about here? Well, we see right off the bat that the Pharisees are challenging Jesus, testing him, saying, "Show us a sign, prove to us that you really are the Messiah." And Jesus doesn't give them a sign. Even though he's done many miracles, and the story ends with a miracle, he will not give the leaders the miracle that they want. And he gets into a boat and he leaves. And he warns them about, he warns his disciples about the way the Pharisees are and the politicians. And they tend to think that he's talking about bread and not having enough food. And he reminds the disciples that Jesus doesn't need to have food in order to make food. He reminds them about 2 different times that he created large amounts of food, and there was plenty for everybody. So in other words, guys, just trust me. And he ends healing a blind man, a miracle that only the Messiah could do, returning the sight to the blind. So that's what the passage is talking about. So how would we apply something like this? Again, there's one interpretation, but there's many applications. I'm just going to stick with one today. And one of the applications that I look at in the passage like this is making sure I understand what God is talking about. The disciples missed what Jesus was talking about. They didn't understand the context. And that's so important. So when I'm reading a passage of Scripture, even like this, it's important for me to see what's going on ahead of what I'm reading and reading at the end, so I know the outcome or the conclusion. That helps me to know the beginning and the end of the story, so I can make a proper application and understanding of this. That's just one application. How would you apply something like this? Would you look at the way the Pharisees are constantly looking for signs? Are you looking for God to act in your life? Maybe you're like the disciples, misunderstanding what he's talking about. Or maybe you're like the blind person looking for a miracle and then kind of confused when Jesus tells you not to tell anybody about it. A lot of great applications here. That's our time for today. See you tomorrow. Mark 8, verses 27 through 38.